This is Brian Jackson. You're watching and listening to Dan Blake with the Jazz Hop
It's
Podcast.
Dan Blake here, and we are here with the Jazz Hop Show, the Jazz Hop Podcast, and we're all about here jazz and everything, jazz and hip hop. And we're here right now with the keyboardist, flautist, singer, composer, producer, globally known for his collaborations with Gil Scott-Heron with classic albums including Winter in America, The First Minute in a Day, and Secrets, hailing from Brooklyn, New York. He's worked with Kool and the Gang, The Roots, and the list goes on. We're here with the one and only Brian Jackson. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a big pleasure. And we want to get straight into things, man. So,
Yes, sir.
a phenomenal classic, reborn, Gil Scott-Heron, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, from the album Pieces of a Man, released in 1974, has been given kind of a new energy, a reworked, featuring lyrics and vocals from Black Thought, from The Roots, produced by yourself, Masters at Work. Tell us the feeling and the thought behind getting this together for your latest track and why that's come about.
Well, the revolution will not be televised was always it was always about the media. It was basically about the media and the influence that the media had on how we thought, and basically it was kind of a play on, if you think about it, it was kind of a play on a concept because, as long as the media was involved, there wasn't really going to be any revolution, because the revolution actually was the media. Except it wasn't on our behalf. It was on the behalf of the capitalist system. So you know, all of the references in the original Revolution Will Not Be Televised. They all came from Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue being the branch of corporate industry that was responsible for psychoanalyzing the population, and engineering their consent. In other words, making them want things that they really didn't need. So that was the whole purpose of the song, was just to draw attention to it, to the fact that we're being led down this road of consumerism, and where was it even going to end? I mean, it was already as absurd as it possibly could have been, we thought, in the 1970s. um, Fast forward to today, and we don't need Madison Avenue anymore. We don't need psychologists. We don't need anybody to get into our heads, because we open our heads up every time we every time we click something on our phone screen. And so, the message though is still the same. We're being fed thoughts and ideas, involuntary, against our will. But the references for the revolution will not be televised are different now. We're more sophisticated consumers now, and we're not necessarily, we don't need to be sold toilet bowl cleaners, and some of the other products that we were talking about in the original version. So when the thought came up to do it, there was only one person, really, I mean, who could really lay it down the way it needed to be, and completely updated. And that was Black Thought, Tariq Trotter. Uh, and he definitely updated all the references so that it was crystal clear to anybody what was being said.
But what was it, speaking of Black Thought, what was it like, collaborating with Black Thought and just, seeing his creative energy together with yours? Like, what was that energy like and the feeling with that, man?
Uh well, it's funny because I've known Questlove for years, and for decades. And I also knew Kirk. When he was in the band, I knew him. And like, I kind of, they're from Philly. So I have a history with Philly also, because I went to school like only 50 miles outside of Philly. So, kind of the Philly consciousness, is always a part, something that's been a part of me. Um, I had never actually sat down with with Tariq before, and it's such a pleasure. I mean, and just the vibe, just his vibe. I mean, he walks in there. We're all expecting, we're thinking we don't know what to expect. You know what I mean? Because he's walking over from Jimmy Fallon. He just finished the he just finished recording the show, and you know it's a winter time, and we're thinking, oh, do we have to get him a cab? Like how many people is he going to bring? Blah blah blah. Brother walks in here, you know he's like, where did you come from? He's like, he said, well, he's just right down the block. I just walked, and and he pops in. We like, well, where's everybody? He came by himself, you know, very quiet, unassuming, brother, and we sat down with him. I sat down with him and I told him, I said, the whole thing is that, the revolution that will not be televised. Great. It's a great piece, but it needs to be recontextualized for the new generation, and for what's happening now, and we thought, well, you'd be the person. And he said, he said, I understood the assignment, you know, and he had already gotten to work on it. He had already, so basically when he got there, he was already prepared. Didn't have a lot to, he didn't say a lot, he wasn't like, on, what I mean? He was just like just flowing with the energy in the room. He gave me a copy of his book, and he just went in there, man, and and did his job. He did his job, and it was just such a pleasant experience, to be around somebody so talented and so humble, and and so generous. I mean, it was a great experience for me.
Wow, incredible record as well. And the Revolution will not be televised is also like the title of your EP out there in the world, and it includes tracks like um, it's your world. How you finding the reception of the new music? And is that jazz, I believe? Yeah, how you finding the reception of the new music? Yeah.
Oh, I'm really humbled by the and deeply thankful for the reception that we've received. I know that a lot of that has to do with the production values of Louis Vega and Kenny Dope, aka Masters of Work. Um, these guys are so musical, you know, um, and they bring such a depth of um of musical history and understanding. And we're all from New York, so we vibe around our culture. We vibe around where we grew up. um and so it was like, that kind of experience. It was just kind of like a coming home. I've known Kenny for as long as I've known Questlove, about 20 something years. um and he and I had talked about this a long time ago. Ironically, he was in the studio with Raheem Devon when I mentioned, this concept to him of younger artists coming back and giving us their take on, on some of the music that that influenced them. Um, well, it took about 25 years, but it finally came around full circle.
And is it true that you're working on a brand new album? If you are, just tell us possibly, about the forthcoming album. Have you got a title? What can we expect? What's the energy like, man?
Oh my God. So the concept originally was, um, what would younger artists do with the music that Gil and I wrote? How would they, I was always interested to see, because a lot of them would tell me, they would say, hey, your music influenced us, and I felt like I really wanted to hear that. I really wanted to understand, like what that meant. And, the best way for me to do that was to hear them do our music. You know what I mean? And so it was a project of mine that I thought, wow, this would be like really great, um, if we could get that to happen. And something I kept in the back of my mind. And when I recorded This Is Brian Jackson, when we released This Is Brian Jackson in 2022 with Peter Dark with BBE, um, the conversation came up about what the next album would be like. And that's when I dropped that dream on him. And he just kind of went into beast mode, man. And the next thing I know, We got 17 tracks ready to be sprung around the fall sometime. No, right, probably between the fall of this year and the winter of next year. Um, Let me just kind of remember some of the all the artists, that are on it. We've got Cindy Mizell and Lisa Fisher and Dawn Tallman and Ramona Dunlop singing background vocals. We got uh we got Josh Milan and Moody Man and Raheem Devon uh and Omar singing, singing on tracks. You know, we got Gene Perez from the Eola Elements of Life, one of my favorite bass players. Um yeah, we got, I mean, it's just so, we got Jay Ivy, doing some great poetry and behind everything. Behind, actually he was on It's Your World, and there's another track that's coming down the pike that that he also did some work on. We got my old time buddy from the Midnight Band, Carl Cornwell, doing something on sax. We got Axel Tosca, who does a lot of the keyboard work for Louis and Elements of Life. And the list just goes. I mean, the list goes on. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody because there are just so many people. Oh, and of course, is that jazz? We had Rasan Patterson. Rasan also does another song as well. The name of the album is Now More Than Ever.
Wow, great name. Great
It
name.
comes from, well, it comes from the first line of the first song on Gil's and my first production together, Winter in America. And the song is Peace Go With You, Brother. And it starts out by saying, now more than ever, all the family must be together. I just want to mention some other poets that we also have. We have Wes Felton, who is the son of Hilton Felton, which who is another like a DC icon, and he drops some amazing poetry as well as a sister from, I think she's from Philly, maybe relocated to Washington D.C., named Raquel Rob Brown. Watch out, watch out, man! When you hear what she does with some of these words, man. I mean, she just is really became instantly one of my favorite poets.
And speaking of, we mentioned Omar a bit earlier. Um, Lovely upbeat flavor in another one of your latest tracks, Remake Energy of your 1974 classic featuring Gil Scott-Heron, The Bottle. Tell us about the feeling behind that record and linking up with the one and only Omar, legend from the UK soul music scene.
It's funny because Omar and I share a music director, Lex Cameron, and yeah, so we've always kind of been in each other's orbits for a long time. Um, y- um, he and Pete and the BBE crew, are very, are also very close, and so we've always kind of run into each other more or less, but we never actually had a chance to work together until this project. And it was kind of like something that happened that actually we didn't even expect. And okay, as the names, I keep thinking about more and more names, I forgot to mention Leroy Burgess, the original Leroy Burgess from the original R&B band Black Ivory.
And what
So
what go ahead.
he does a lot of string arrangements, and that's what he did on this album. He did some incredible string arrangement work.
Wow, you can't wait to hear. You can't wait to hear everything. And I want to know, what does jazz and hip hop music mean to you?
Well, I'm a student of African music, of all types of African music. If it comes from Africa, I'm a student of it, which basically means that I'm a student of all music. You know what I mean? Because the majority of music, I mean, I would venture to say primarily all music, has some African roots, just like we all have African roots as human beings, you know. Um, and so I understood early on, I think, as I started to study, that the jazz rhythms, they're basically West African rhythms, flipped on different instruments because when black people were um, exported to the United States, the first things that were taken away from them were the drums, and so they had to use whatever they had, to be drum to recreate those rhythms, So if there was a stick, they would use it. If there was a pot, they would use it. If there was a washing tub, they would use it. You know, we used every possible thing because drums were illegal. You could be, like you could be punished for playing a drum. And so this is kind of how jazz came about. Um, People used to get together in New Orleans in Congo Square and play whatever instruments they had, recreating those rhythms. And that was in New Orleans, and that's how everything kind of started to come together, along with the slave chants and like the different um uh songs that people would sing when they were working, and this all was African. Okay. And jazz evolved from that. Okay. Hip hop, same thing. Most of the drum beats in hip hop have their roots in African rhythms, Afro Caribbean, rhythms, Latin rhythms, and I can go into a whole thing about how Latin rhythms kind of fueled the dance movement, of the 80s disco movement, the EDM now. So I mean, it's I'm a student of all these things, and I love them, because I understand their roots.
And when you hear, like, say, jazz and hip hop combined, and because our show, it's all about that jazz hop, that connection. Um, I need like a sampled record from you, a special record that's been sampled in jazz and hip hop. When you hear it, what crosses your mind first and why?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I mean, I think what really got me, kind of got under my skin were some things by Tribe Called Quest. Music that they had sampled, like for instance, I'm just thinking right now of Bonita Applebum, for instance. That to me was like such a classic jazz sample, but there were others. I mean, there were Digable Planets, who I actually went on the road with. I went on tour with them for a couple of years. Um, I mean, uh, this is like De La Soul, also used a lot of jazz samples. So this is when I kind of picked up. I kind of my ears perked up at that point, because I understood hip hop. I dug, where that was coming from, and how its roots were all tied in with the toasting and in Jamaica, and I got it. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn, so I understood, like the evolution of that branch, of hip hop. And then when other people came along and started thinking, oh man, but they probably thinking the same as me. I mean, this is all African. This is all us. Why don't we just try to incorporate, see if it blends together? And it did. It blended together perfectly.
What would you say is one of your most cherished moments working alongside Gil Scott-Heron?
I can't really put it. I can't really put it down to one moment. I think the thing that I guess if I had to choose one moment, it would probably be when we stepped in the studio for the first time to record Pieces of a Man. And on the other side of the studio were Ron Carter, Bernard Purdy, and Hubert Laws. Um, I think that, we kind of looked at each other at that point and realized, oh wow, so our music must be really, really serious. If it wasn't, if nobody thought it was serious, they would go to think it was serious after those guys laid what they did on top of it. And that's why I always see, whenever I see Ron or I see Hubert to this day, I say thank you for legitimizing our music. Because maybe some people would have heard it and thought, oh yeah, that's nice, that's cool. But when they heard Hubert Laws and Bernard Purdy and Ron Carter playing on it, everybody said, oh, we need to really give this a listen.
What is like a wisdom gem that you live by, a quote in life that you live by?
So people come up to me, young artists, they always come up to me, and you think I'm kind of being facetious, but I'm really not. When people come up to me and they'll say to me like, "Hey, what is the secret to, you know, to longevity, in the music industry?" And I tell them, well, the secret to longevity in the music industry is longevity in life. You know, just live long enough, and you might see something happen because things can take a long time in the music business, and the best thing for you to do is to be able to survive the wait.
Right, that's serious. That's a serious gem right there, you know. Yeah,
And
that took.
I'm not even going to say that, that even waiting is going to, is actually going to, but you have a better chance. The other thing I say, in addition to that, I say that you just never can give up, because the day that you decide you're going to pack it all in could be the day that it happens. So those two things together, stay alive, and stay active.
Wow, incredible, incredible. Um, just one more tip, kind of regarding the creative process, because this is a special place for yourself, and it's just like writing, producing. It's just a very delicate place for artists, and everyone has their different ways of going about it. What's like one little tip that you would kind of give for that side of things?
Well, maybe a couple.
Okay.
One thing is when you have an idea, put it down as soon as you can. If you got to say it, if you got to say it into your phone, you know what I mean. If you got to go to your to your special place, and get it down some kind of way. Write it down. Um, Put it on your phone. Record it on your phone. Whatever you have to do it immediately. I can't even tell you how many songs I have lost and continue to lose just by the fact that I didn't get to something quick enough, to lay it down. Um, so that's one thing I can say. I can also say trust your instincts, because just because it may be something that is doesn't seem like it fits in to your persona or your groove or your comfort zone, or what people expect of you or what you expect of yourself, don't even worry about that. Just trust the fact that it came through you and therefore it is part of you. Just let it happen. Also, I would say let the song tell you what it needs. Too many people, like, especially like guys, people who produce, they having all of these ideas about what they want to do with the song, and the song don't really want that. Let the song tell you what it wants. Sometimes it just might be a guitar and a voice. You have to let the song dictate to you what it wants. Yeah, so I guess that's probably my best tips.
And speaking of, songs and music, what's a moment on the road? A moment on the road that was funny that you enjoyed when you was on the road. You thought, "Wow, I'm having an amazing time right now. This is life, man." That you can share anyway. That you can share.
Oh, okay, yeah. Now you just blew it. Because I was gonna start, I was getting ready to go into like the tour bus and everything, but okay, never mind. We're just the tour bus is a great experience when you're young. When you're young, having being on a tour bus and going from town to town, and just like everybody being together, and having a great time. It's one of the best. It's one of the best experiences. um yeah, I can't think of, I mean, there was one, I don't know how funny this was, but I know I was, and it wasn't even necessarily with Gil, but I was in a band in college, and it was a cover band, and we were doing all this, all the soul stuff. We used to play for the mixers in college, and we were getting ready to do our big finale, which was Shaft, and the hits at the end, so, and so like I didn't, and there was this sister that was, like in the front row, and I was kind of like feeling her, and like, so I kind of put some extra emphasis on those hits, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't realize that my Rhodes, my it was a Wurlitzer. My Wurlitzer was kind of sliding off the stage, you know. So as I hit the last note, the Wurlitzer kind of slid off the stage, you know, and I went with
Okay. Yeah, you went for it, man.
yeah, I
Yeah.
went for it, man. I went for it.
Yeah, man.
Let's say I got her attention.
Yeah, man, you got to shoot your shot in life, man, you know? That's it. Full dedication, full commitment. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that story. Thanks for sharing. Just getting to the last few questions now. We always do a thing on the show called the language check. So it's just I want you to just give us some kind of slang from Brooklyn, New York that you use with the that you've used growing up, or something you're using now that you can share for me to pass on to the next guest. Because I like to pass on all the slang, so we got a whole universe of different language going around.
Oh wow, man. So I guess I want to go with this your world, because like this is how it happens. When we were growing up, kind of like when we were kids, there used to be a phrase everybody used to say, "What's happening?" What's happening, man?
Yeah, what's
Like
happening
people
here?
still say that, "What's happening, baby?" And at some point along the way, the response was, "Oh man, it's your world," you know. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, and that's basically where the song came from, because I really had to think about that, you know, and I understood it. I understand it now as an adult, I really understand that now, because your reality is what you see, you know, and that's basically all there is, you know. So what we call reality is basically just our, what how our brain interprets the things that are coming into it. So that's probably my, it's your world.
It's your world, yeah. We're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna share that one and keep passing that one on for sure. And
Good, good.
lastly, what's your thoughts on the state of jazz and hip hop today? What's your thoughts?
Oh man, I've met so many great jazz artists and hip hop artists who people might not know about, but they may or may not, ever reach full notoriety. And the problem is, I think with that is that there are just too many people out there, and there are too many good artists out there. The internet has made has made it possible for almost everybody who needs to express themselves musically, or in any creative way, um, that they have a platform for it, which is great. But the problem is that there's so much now that it's very possible that some of the greatest artists will never see the light of day, just because they're buried underneath all of the music, and some of it is really great that's out there. um so I feel like there's some people who are really doing some incredible work. I've met some incredible um, young jazz artists, over the years, and that doesn't stop happening.
And is there anyone in your mind that comes to mind that you want to big up or be like,
Oh,
yeah, look out for that person, a
oh
name
man,
or two?
I mean, like I've been doing some work. We've shared a couple of stages recently, Casa overall, and we've shared a couple of stages. We shared a stage at Love Supreme, um, and some of the musicians in his band are absolutely mind blowing. Like one who I had worked with early on when he was in New York at school, Emilio Modeste, who is the saxophonist. He's a saxophonist, and there were two saxophonists in the band, and they were also doing other things like playing keyboards, and the other saxophonist also playing drums. The other saxophonist being um, Tomoki Sanders, who is the son of Pharoah Sanders, also a great tenor saxophonist and drummer. And it's just that the list goes on and on. I mean, you just can't. It's really incredible, man. I'm so encouraged whenever I see what's happening with some of the younger artists, out here. I always say the tradition is safe.
Love that. Love that. And on that note, Brian Jackson, thank you so much for joining the Jazz Hop podcast. I
My
really
pleasure, man.
appreciate you, man.
Thank you, and I
Um,
appreciate you as well, man. Keep doing what you're doing. You know,
Thank you, man.
you do that.
Anything you would like to add?
Um, no, I mean, just about the album. I mean, if you wanna, if you wanna follow me, I'm over there on Instagram. I, try to throw some thoughts out every once in a while. Brian underscore Jackson, and just just stay tuned. We got a great album coming out soon, and it's going to be called Now More Than Ever on the BBE label. Looking forward to it.
Wow. Amazing. We look forward to it. So it's Dan Blake and Brian Jackson on Jazz Hop. Yeah, man. All
Oh
right,
yes, sir.
brother. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so what we'll do now, we'll just do one radio drop. So I'll just tell you what to say, and
Sure.
then yeah, you just repeat it back, really.
No worries, no worries. I
Okay.
got you.
So if you just say, "This is Brian Jackson," you're watching and listening to Dan Blake. Or no, actually, this is Brian Jackson. You're watching and listening to Dan Blake with the Jazz Hop podcast.
This is Brian Jackson. You're watching and listening to the Dan. Oh, go ahead.